Bye, have a great time.
ADR, this is King Black again, and I wanted to talk about a book review. A book review of a title called Lady Q, The Rise and Fall of Lion Queen. Now, I'm going to be navigating this somewhat carefully for reasons that may be obvious to some and not to others. I wanted to read this book without any pre-bias, so I refrained from reading any synopsis or reviews about it beforehand. I wanted to go into it blind. I ended up finishing it in 2 days. I was left underwhelmed, to be completely honest with all of you. There were a few problems with the book that bothered me tremendously. The first comes in the hilarious way they change names for either legal or privacy reasons. The main point being with who the book refers to as quote unquote Tino, which is hilarious because we know who they are mentioning in the book. Secondly, I don't like the whiny, immature tone the book took on early on in the early chapters, and it only escalated from there. Now, granted, she did have some messed up things happen to her from an early age, but through her mid-teens to present day, a lot of her suffering was brought on by decisions personally made by her. Especially in the later chapters when things rapidly start going downhill, it is her being stubborn, headstrong, and not seeing the big picture. By the end of the book, I had the impression it was just one big sob story with blaming everyone else but herself. It seems the time spent in the nation is secondary and not explained in depth, whether this was to avoid identification of individuals or if simply many things were omitted. The problem in ex-members writing a book and generalizing is that they come at the subject with a sour taste in their mouth, for the most part. Instead of blaming decisions made by individuals, it is inferred that everyone was cool with what was going on. Especially in the case of the subject of this book, a lot of the drug dealing was in fact begun by her own initiative. Nobody was forcing these drugs into her hand for her to either consume or to sell. And we're talking about Chicago right now. And even then, it attracted those who have lost themselves in that world and the consequences that arose from several situations that came from that drug world. No personal acceptance or responsibility. Even at the end of the book, she's constantly messing up, even though she isn't in the nation anymore. Further proof that the nation doesn't share the majority of the blame. Had she been around Raina more, which is somebody that is mentioned in the book, and not involve herself in dealing, her experience may have turned out differently. You know, this particular person had just gotten lost, and I don't know, false false promises. She was just trying to escape reality. She went head first, head deep into using drugs. A whole mess of unprotected sex in the book, and one of the main tenets of the ALKQN is that kings should never mess with another king's queen, meaning no king is supposed to be going after his brother's girlfriend, wife, fiance. But in this book, it just shows, at least in Chicago at that time, according to her account, how many of the Pee Wee's primitive stage kings were not following this tenet. It was all about personal profit, personal greed, people stepping on each other, backstabbing each other. It delves into, there's a slight picture into the civil war that was happening between Land Kings, where since everything in Chicago at that time was based on drug dealing, you had enemies that were not necessarily coming from outside the organization. Instead, you had leaders within the nation who wanted to control more territory. So they were basically, it was kind of like the mafia, where they have one head of a family kill the other head of a family just to take over their territory. That's basically what was happening in Chicago, and probably still happening now. I'm not sure. I'm not from KMC. I'm full bloodline. so I can't speak on Chicago's half. But the book, man, out of a rating scale of 1 to 10, man, I give it a 3. You got to take it with a grain of salt. You know, she pins a lot of the blame, a lot of the scapegoat is the nation. It's really easy to pin, oh, all my problems are because of the Lion Kings. When you really read the book, there was no indication that a higher up Lion King in most cases directly ordered her to do something. And we had to remember this was, at least most of the book is taking place back in the 90s where, you know, crack and dope and all that was at the height, you know, of its popularity. I mean, people were just turning to it to make excuse me, a quick buck. And then you got people out here who's trying to live right and exposes how easy it is to pin the blame on the organization, on the nation. And one book that I haven't read and probably I will never read because I mean, any of you guys have read it, let me know how it is or if it's any good. Is My Bloody Life or Once a King, Always a King by Raimundo Sanchez. You know, a lot of these people got a sour taste in their mouth because of individual decisions. You know, growing up, you know, I have seen dealing, but no one, and I reiterate, no one in my circle ever pressured me to do anything that I didn't want to do. You know, the goal is to keep everybody, as I have stated repeatedly in my videos, out of jail, at home with their families. At least that's how I view this nation. ADR.